Hello everybody! Imagine that you are listening to a long and eloquent introduction to a video that was made by an actually intelligent person, which is precisely not what you're going to be getting today, unlike usually. The point is, or the reason for this unfortunate turn of events, is that the previous recording of this particular topic has been corrupted by absolutely abysmal quality of this sound. So I'm re-recording this and I'm going to be doing it as lazily as possible, which means that I have a script before me and I'm going to read it in a one go, so we're going to listen to every stutter I'm going to make along the way. Enjoy! Chris Froome and 5 stages of disc. If you haven't heard, Chris Froome has made a video. Everyone is talking about it. By everyone I mean a few people in our little teacup of storms 3 weeks ago or so. And so yes, I am very late to this banquet. However, I'm going to party like it's 2019. If you haven't noticed yet, disc brakes are taking over road cycling. Whether you like it or not, they are coming down market, and I think that in not too far future discs are going to become, well, the norm really. But it was not all like that not too long ago. Go back mere 10 years and road bikes were rim brake only, and my personal desire to run discs was, well, weird. When I was building the first iteration of my ultimate gravel bike, then gravel bikes were not a thing, and there were precisely 3 brakes on the market that could be fed from a road drifter. Since then, gravel became a thing and discs became the norm, at least when GCN's benefactors are concerned. That is because mountain bikers have it easy. MTBs exist in a meticulously held image of being gear dependent and mired in a cloud of engineering mysticism. This makes selling senseless motion as innovation pretty easy. Road cycling though, road cycling is a very mature sport. It goes without saying that new and improving something mature with newest and improverest game changer is hard. A road bike pretty much peaked around 1990s, and everything since then is mostly optimizing the remaining 1%. Materials got better, bikes got lighter, gears got more plentiful, but none of that changed the sport in a meaningful way. We are not going to get any faster by changing equipment. But then, how to make consumers consume? Answer: obviously not by making the paint job different. You do it by making changes to the image of the thing they are supposed to consume. Disc brakes were slowly creeping into road bikes with a backdoor in a form of cyclocross. They were not taken with open arms though. There was resistance, as with any UCI-related discipline, has UCI-related traditionalism ingrained into it. But alas, disc brakes were allowed and talk about them on road bikes began, and was immediately shot down because discs are unnecessary. Then leading manufacturers started offering disc group sets and murmurs began about allowing them on Pro Tours, and were immediately shut down because disc brakes are unnecessary. Then, under the pressure from the said manufacturers, no doubt, discs were allowed on UCI road races. And the cyclopolis of vice and virtue ascended upon the world. Moral outrage about pure form of a road bike was shouted from the rooftops. Cassandric visions of poor pro riders bunched up, being cut to pieces by whirling red-hot discs were uttered. The peak was reached when one dude took a tumble in some sort of a very important race, and that was totally because of discs. At that point, UCI banned them again. Rim brake mafia rejoiced. Temporarily. Because regardless of anything, disc brakes, as you would expect from an autonomous system designed for one job, excel at performing aforementioned. They are just plain better at making you go slow, which I guess is against the point of racing, but I digress. Anyhow, once this mundane fact of being better at stopping people became obvious to the average bike buying people, there was no going back. Regardless of what your opinion is, those who make the stuff see what sells and want to sell more of it. You see, Mr. Froome is in this weird position that in order to do his job, he needs to be in a very friendly relationship with those who enable it. By the very nature of being a racer, the product he is selling is exposure. As one Polish poet once sung, the patron gives the gold, the patron requires. Even Mr. Froome is not an exception. His victories are all impressive and all that, but it takes the green stuff to do the racing all over the world, and the green stuff ain't Di2. It comes with strings attached. The customers want discs. The manufacturers want to sell them, and they want the exposure to bring to the spotlight their disc-equipped bike. Rim brakes are passé, rim brakes are old, rim brakes are antiquated, rim brakes don't sell. Mr. Froome, as much as he does not seem to be wanting to, will be riding discs, and his weak sauce arguments against them are, well, they just seem like an uncomfortable coping mechanism of someone who was maneuvered into a situation they don't want to be in. I empathize that someone who is as driven towards succeeding as Mr. Froome is, any change to the process which has obviously worked in the past is going to be treated with suspicion. Consider, your average road race takes about 4 hours to complete, start to finish. That is 240 minutes. The pace is rather brisk, as you would imagine. Being a full minute before other dudes means that you beat them by a mere 0.25%. Being a full bike length before them means that you won by putting a fraction more effort than the guy behind you. In such an environment, a slight change to the equipment might totally shuffle the order on the finish line. The important part is that Mr. Froome's merchandise is exposure. If by making a switch to discs, or tubeless, or carbon, or round spokes, or non-oversized pulleys, or whatever, he gets shuffled to the second or third or fourth place, his contract with whomever will be a few trailing zeros less glorious. Nonetheless, the pressures from those who sponsor the sport is there, and even Mr. Froome will be riding disc-equipped bike. When he rides it, he will get to like discs for their power, and because everyone in Pro Triathlon will be riding the newest and greatest disc-equipped 2x12 electronic Dura Ace or whatever concoction of Phalant Evo SRAM will cobble up from mangle corpses of kittens, the point he's making now will be moot. In my personal opinion, though, the entire rim versus disc debate is largely a Class 1 storm in a hermetically sealed teapot. All things considered, road bikes peaked in the 90s, if you recall. Rim brakes, for all purposes, work just fine. While discs are better, even with all their betterness, they are just, well, better over something that was, for the majority of everyone, perfectly adequate. I mean, sure, my 100 with change kilogram abundance does benefit from having big brakes, but I am not normal in that regard. While for some people, the difference between hydraulic, 4-pot, metallic padded disc brakes on 8-inch rotors is night and day in comparison to good old rims, for the majority, it's just mostly a little bit of quality of life improvement. And with all that in mind, I thank you for your investment in my mutterings, and unfortunately this rather poor reading of the script I have before me, and I hope to see you in the next video. And now is the time for post-video, which is not supposed to be scripted, I think, but I have scripted it because I am a very special person. So let's laugh at the winner of whatever Mr. Froome has won, because I honestly don't know. I just know that he's good at being on a bicycle. Anyhow, his problems with disc brakes. 1. Constant rubbing. What does he mean by this? If his brakes are dragging non-stop, then I'd fire his mechanic, but I consider this unlikely because he's Mr. Froome, so he has probably very qualified mechanic. I mean, that goes without saying. So there must be a second reason. And, well, I think that this is because, 1, things flex, and 6.8 kilogram of a road bike, which is ridden hard by someone who is winning stuff, is probably flexing more than usual. So, as things flex, they tend to touch each other, and if there's a very little space between those things, they can touch pretty frequently. The point is that disc brakes, because of their composition and very little gap between the pad and the rotor, are going to be touching pretty frequently, and because of the composition of the pad, they are going to be very vocal about it. They are going to sing the song of their people. And unfortunately, rim brakes are doing precisely the same thing, but because the pads are made of rubber or cork or what have you, they are going to be silent. Which is obviously going to seem like disc brakes are noisy, but they really aren't. Now, Now the second issue is that disc brakes, well, not all manufacturers are attaching pads to the pistons in their calipers. I think only Hayes and Magura are doing this, but correct me if I'm wrong. But the point is that most rely on a very weak spring to push the pads apart, and sometimes, especially when the brake is dirty or it's wet or some sort of contamination has gotten into it, the pads are not going to fully retract, and once again they are going to be singing the song of their people, and they're going to be rather vocal about it, and it's going to give you this sensation that your brakes are robbing you of energy. The point, however, I'm trying to make now is that in both of those cases, well, it's completely benign, to be honest. They are not going to be robbing you of any energy, at least not to a magnitude that you should be worrying about. Now, the second thing is that his brakes are supposedly completely overheating all the time, and now here Mr. Froome is, in all honesty, a victim of roadies being insufferable ballerinas when it comes to how their gear looks. Because I need to start with one important caveat: I have cooked a brake once in my career of riding, which is 15 or 16 years at this point, or riding disc only, and the brake got better after a few seconds, I think. I don't recall really. Anyhow, with that caveat in mind, well, what is true is that rim brakes are attached or are rubbing against a huge heatsink in a form of a rim. And obviously, because it's a huge heatsink, it's also a huge, well, a reservoir for heat, so it's very hard to overheat rim brakes. However, that's only true if you are riding aluminum rims, and I'm kind of guessing that Mr. Froome isn't riding them. Oh, and by the way, before I forget, this particular reason that the rim is such a massive heatsink is the reason why many tandems, which obviously see much more heat when they are being stopped, the tandems are often specced with a drag brake, which is precisely a rim brake, because disc brakes don't manage heat all that well, at least prolonged exposure to heat. Anyhow, my point is that Mr. Froome is most likely not riding aluminum rims, he is riding carbon rims, and carbon rims are not as well of a, well, conductor of heat. They overheat just as much as disc brakes, if not more, because they simply aren't taking the heat as well as discs. If you're dealing with a long downhills, then you can almost guarantee or almost be certain that dragging your disc brakes might cause some sort of an issue. And the ballerina part is that just about any problem with discs can be solved by using either sintered metallic pads or larger rotors. And frankly, considering speeds that pro riders reach, I am puzzled why UCI didn't mandate 180-140mm combo or 200-340 rotors, but then again, I tend to make sense, UCI not so much. And the ballerina part, 8 inches of a rotor would look weird on a road bike. Then again, at least one Olympian wouldn't suffer a rather nasty crash if she had brakes that would stop her from the speeds she was reaching, and she clearly wasn't because she crashed. Anyhow, switching gears. Two things that puzzle me about Mr. Froome's comments is his fear of potential of mechanical issues or hydraulic issues, I guess, and warped discs. Now, I don't know how poor is the quality of Dura Ace, because I'm usually not buying stuff from that level, as you can imagine. But after 20 years of pretty much dominating mountain bikes, you would expect that Shimano got that thing figured out. I mean, my $5 rotors from China aren't warping, and I sincerely never had a mechanical or hydraulic issue with my brakes, unless they were Shimano. Anyhow, I ride 15-year-old Hope Mono 6s on my enduro bikes. From 4 sets I had originally, one finally failed after 13 years of abuse, and I abuse my bikes, believe me. So I guess this is fine for something that is 13 years old, because 5 other sets of Hopes from that era, 3 Mono 6s and 2 Mono Minis, are still going strong and don't seem to be showing any signs of failing anytime soon. So, what's my point here? Well, I'm not comparing myself to Mr. Froome because, full disclosure, I haven't won a Vuelta, or Tour de France or anything in particular really. What I'm getting at is that I hardly consider myself to be unique. There are literally millions of hydraulic disc brakes being used, and the tech is so cheap that Chinese will sell you a disc brake, hydraulic one, for $10. Yet Mr. Froome is having issues. Now, imagine this. Disc brakes are so cheap that they are being sold without issue on a German market, which is very protective of consumers, and it's very difficult. If something breaks, you're going to have an army of lawyers at your door wanting compensation. So my final words are, Mr. Froome, are you pulling our leg, or is it a cry for help?